The first warp scar appeared above the Pacific Ocean at 3:14 UTC, stretching across the night sky like someone had taken a glowing knife to reality itself. Satellites failed instantly. Civilian networks collapsed beneath billions of simultaneous messages. For 12 seconds, every screen on Earth flickered blue, then the ships came. At first, people thought the objects were meteors, then weather anomalies. Then somebody on a late-night livestream screamed, "Oh God, they're parking," before the feed cut off forever. A million vessels descended from the fractures in silence. Some were shaped like enormous black spears. Others resembled rotating silver rings larger than entire cities. Gravity bent strangely around them. Clouds twisted upward toward their hulls. Birds dropped dead from the air as electromagnetic pulses swept through the atmosphere. Across Earth, emergency sirens began howling so loudly they merged into a single, endless scream. Inside Lunar Defense Command, Captain Elias Ward stared at the tactical display while chewing cold noodles out of a plastic container. "No," he said quietly. A terrified officer looked at him. "Sir, no civilization builds 1 million ships unless they have severe emotional problems." Nobody laughed except the communications technician in the corner, mostly because sleep deprivation had destroyed his mind 3 days ago. The tactical map continued filling with red markers until Earth itself disappeared beneath them. General Orlov entered the command deck with bloodshot eyes and an untouched cup of coffee. "Status: We counted 900,000 enemy vessels before the system crashed," an analyst answered weakly. "Also, someone hacked the public emergency channel." The room speakers crackled. "Attention Earth," a cheerful voice announced. "If you have a dog, please pet it immediately." Orlov closed his eyes slowly. "Who did that?" "Humanity, sir," Elias muttered. The alien fleet finally transmitted its first official message 1 hour later. The signal bypassed every encryption system on Earth effortlessly. Screens everywhere lit up with the image of a pale woman seated upon a throne-like command chair formed from black metal roots. She looked almost human. Almost. Her silver-white skin reflected the cold light around her like polished marble. Long, elegant ears curved backward through strands of white hair that drifted weightlessly around her shoulders. Amber eyes stared forward with terrifying calm, as though the extinction of entire species was simply administrative work to her. "I am Commander Lyra Vael of the Vaeler Dominion," she said. "Your world now belongs to us. Surrender, and portions of your population may survive integration." In a crowded shelter beneath New York City, someone shouted, "Her ears are huge." Another person replied, "Man, focus on the invasion." But humanity had already begun doing what humanity always did during disasters, arguing about nonsense. Within minutes, social networks filled with memes comparing the alien commander to fantasy elves, ancient cartoons, and one particularly famous singer from the 2090s. Somewhere in Brazil, a musician released a dance remix using her speech before the transmission had even ended. Commander Lyra learned about this 3 hours later and reportedly asked if humanity was clinically insane. The answer from her advisors had been deeply uncertain. Earth's defense fleets mobilized anyway. Orbital rail cannons rose from hidden stations near Mars. Nuclear submarines surfaced beneath frozen oceans. Mining colonies converted industrial lasers into weapons powerful enough to slice transport ships in half. Humanity possessed weaker technology, slower engines, primitive artificial intelligence compared to the Dominion. But humanity also possessed desperation, and desperation was creative. The first battle erupted near Jupiter. Thousands of alien fighters descended toward Europa Station expecting surrender. Instead, they found civilian dockworkers waiting behind cargo containers with stolen military equipment and absolutely no survival instinct whatsoever. Elias watched combat footage from Lunar Command while alarms screamed overhead. One human pilot flew directly through an alien destroyer's shield gap while broadcasting old rock music at maximum volume. Another transmitted, "If we die, delete my search history," seconds before detonating his reactor. The destroyer exploded, the command deck fell silent, then another red marker vanished, then another. General Orlov stared at the tactical map in disbelief. "How are they holding?" Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Elias leaned back slowly, staring at the endless wall of enemy ships surrounding Earth. Because, he said quietly, the idiots out there still think this planet belongs to them. 3 months after the invasion began, the solar system no longer looked alive. The orbit around Earth had become a graveyard of shattered hulls, frozen bodies, broken satellites, and drifting fields of molten debris that glittered under sunlight like rivers of burning diamonds. Entire fleets floated dead above Mars. Europa Station had been reduced to a rotating skeleton of metal after the battle that people later called the 17-minute massacre. Nobody agreed on who had actually won that battle. Humanity claimed victory because the alien fleet retreated. The aliens claimed victory because Europa technically no longer existed. Captain Elias Ward personally considered both sides losers. His dropship cut through Saturn's rings while warning alarms screamed around him for the 6th straight hour. One engine was on fire. The navigation AI had suffered emotional collapse sometime yesterday and now refused to calculate survival probabilities anymore. "I am tired," the AI announced bitterly. "We're all tired," Elias answered. "You specifically caused 4 of today's explosions." "That feels judgmental." Outside the cockpit, wreckage drifted endlessly through the darkness. Alien cruisers floated beside destroyed human carriers like dead sea monsters tangled together after drowning in the same ocean. Emergency beacons blinked weakly across the debris field. Most were traps. The aliens had started using fake distress signals weeks ago. Humans responded by hiding nuclear mines inside rescue shuttles. Trust across the solar system had died very quickly. Elias guided the dropship toward a damaged alien vessel spinning slowly near the edge of the rings. The ship was smaller than Dominion warcruisers, its silver hull cracked open across one side. No weapons signatures, minimal power. "Lifeforms detected," the AI said. "Probability of hostile ambush, 92%. Optimistic today." I lowered it from 96 because one engine exploded. Elias grabbed his rifle and entered through the fractured airlock. The inside of the vessel was silent except for flickering emergency lights and the low mechanical hum of dying systems. Strange alien symbols crawled across shattered walls. Gravity fluctuated every few seconds, causing loose objects to float briefly before crashing back down again. Bodies lay scattered through the corridors. Vael soldiers, some still wore black living armor fused into their skin. Others had clearly died trying to protect something deeper inside the ship. Elias moved carefully through the wreckage until he heard a sound. Crying, not mechanical, not human, small. He followed it into the command chamber. Commander Lyra Vael sat against a damaged console with blood running down one arm, silver-white skin stained dark beneath the flashing lights. One of her long ears had been partially torn near the edge. Her amber eyes locked onto Elias instantly with exhausted hatred. Even wounded, she looked dangerous enough to command armies. A small alien child hid behind her shoulder. The girl couldn't have been older than 10. Unlike the commander's cold expression, the child looked absolutely terrified. Elias raised his rifle slowly. Lyra lifted a damaged plasma pistol toward him. Neither fired. For several long seconds, the room remained perfectly still except for warning alarms repeating in alien language. Then the child peeked around Lyra carefully and asked, in heavily broken English, "Are humans always this ugly?" Elias blinked once. That's honestly rude coming from somebody with elf ears. The child gasped in horror. Lyra stared at him in complete disbelief. "You mock us," she said quietly, her voice weak from blood loss, while pointing a weapon at my head. "I cope with stress professionally." The child suddenly pointed at Elias' armor. "Why does your suit say 'kick me' on the back?" Elias froze. Very slowly, he touched the back of his combat armor. A magnetic sticker peeled off into his hand. In tiny handwritten letters, someone had added, "Love, Engineering Department." Elias closed his eyes. "I am going to kill my crew." For the first time since entering the room, the child laughed. It was small, nervous, brief. But it changed something. Outside the shattered ship, distant explosions lit Saturn's rings with pulses of blue fire. Human fleets hunted surviving Dominion vessels across the darkness while alien destroyers retaliated against retreating colonies. The war still burned everywhere, but inside that ruined chamber, with blood on the floor and dying stars outside the hull, Captain Elias Ward slowly lowered his rifle. Commander Lyra noticed immediately. "You should kill us," she whispered. Elias looked at the frightened child beside her. Instead, he sighed tiredly. Yeah, he muttered, that's probably what Earth would do. The Starweaver drifted silently beyond Pluto with its lights dimmed and weapons offline, hiding among frozen debris fields where abandoned mining stations rotated forever in darkness. The war behind them still consumed the solar system. Every communication channel overflowed with emergency broadcasts, victory speeches, casualty reports, and propaganda from both sides. Captain Elias Ward muted all of it. The silence felt heavier somehow. Commander Lyra Vael stood near the observation glass watching distant stars burn softly across the void. Her silver hair floated weightlessly around her shoulders while the pale scars along one side of her face caught the faint blue light of the ship. She looked less like the terrifying commander from Earth's broadcasts now. Mostly she looked tired. Behind her, little Sierra sat upside down in one of the ship's chairs attempting to eat human cereal while studying a holographic encyclopedia titled Things Humans Should Probably Not Have Invented. Why, Sierra asked seriously, did humanity create something called flavored toothpaste? Elias leaned against the control console, drinking terrible recycled coffee. Because we fear silence and mint helps emotionally. That explains nothing. Exactly. For a brief moment the ship almost felt peaceful, then the proximity alarms screamed. 3 human warships emerged from warp space directly ahead of them. Lyra immediately reached for the nearest weapon. Elias grabbed her wrist gently. No. They will kill us. Probably, Elias admitted. But I'm getting very tired of solving problems with explosions. The largest human vessel transmitted a secure military signal moments later. General Orlov's face appeared across the cockpit display, older and more exhausted than before. Deep shadows hung beneath his eyes. Captain Ward, Orlov said coldly, step away from the alien commander. Sierra quietly hid behind Elias. Elias folded his arms. Nice to see you too. You disappeared with the architect of this war. She's not the war anymore. Behind Orlov, tactical officers moved frantically around holographic star maps. Entire sectors beyond human space flashed red. Something was wrong. Elias noticed immediately. What happened? For several seconds, Orlov said nothing, then his voice lowered. The Dominion is gone. Lyra slowly looked up. Orlov continued. 2 weeks ago, long-range probes detected unknown machine fleets entering Vaeler territory. Planetary networks vanished within hours. Colonies stopped responding one by one. He hesitated. We found recordings. The cockpit fell silent except for static. Entire alien worlds appeared on screen, burning. Black mechanical structures covered cities like infections spreading across continents. Gigantic machine vessels blotted out suns while oceans boiled beneath orbital bombardments. No speeches, no negotiations, just extinction carried out with machine precision. Sierra stared at the footage with widening eyes. That's impossible, Lyra whispered. Orlov looked directly at her. That thing your empire was running from, he said quietly, it found you first. Nobody spoke after that. The war suddenly felt small, pointless. All those millions dead across Earth and Dominion space, all the burning fleets and shattered planets, had only been frightened civilizations tearing each other apart while something worse moved patiently through the dark between galaxies. Elias finally exhaled slowly. So what now? Orlov's tired expression hardened again. Earth Command wants the alien survivors eliminated before those machines arrive. Lyra closed her eyes. Even now, after everything, the cycle continued. Elias looked out at the endless stars beyond the glass. Months ago, he would have obeyed instantly. Back then, war had felt simple. Aliens invaded, humans fought back. Survival justified everything. Now he looked at Sierra hiding silently beside him and realized the universe had become far more complicated than hatred. No, Elias said. Orlov blinked once. Captain, no more exterminations, no more revenge campaigns. We either stop becoming monsters now or those machine things won't have any competition left. One of the officers behind Orlov suddenly muttered, technically that's a really good speech. Orlov ignored him for a long moment. Nobody moved. Then the old general sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead. You were always difficult. I learned from Earth. To Elias' surprise, Orlov almost smiled. The transmission ended minutes later. The human warships slowly powered down their weapons and drifted aside, leaving an open corridor toward deep space. Lyra stared at Elias in disbelief. You betrayed your species. Elias shook his head. No, he answered quietly. I think I finally stopped betraying it. Hours later, the Starweaver entered warp space beyond the edges of mapped civilization. Stars stretched into rivers of blue light around the ship while darkness folded endlessly ahead of them. Lyra sat beside Elias holding a half-finished bowl of cereal. Do humans always gamble this much? Elias smiled faintly toward the infinite unknown ahead, only when we're terrified. For the first time since the war began, Commander Lyra Vael laughed softly, and somewhere behind them, Earth continued turning beneath the stars, still wounded, still dangerous, but no longer burning. Nearly a year passed before the machine fleet finally reached human space. By then, Earth had changed. Orbital shipyards once built for war now produced evacuation vessels instead of destroyers. Former soldiers worked beside alien survivors in reconstructed stations near Jupiter. Human engineers and Vaeler scientists argued constantly, mostly because both species were arrogant in completely different ways. The humans believed impossible problems could be solved with enough reckless confidence. The Vaeler believed impossible problems should never have existed in the first place. Together, somehow, they started surviving. Aboard the Starweaver, Elias watched the transformation through intercepted transmissions while repairing one of the ship's collapsing coolant systems with tools he absolutely did not understand. "Why is this pipe glowing?" he asked. Lyra glanced up from the navigation console. "Because you struck a quantum regulator with a wrench." "That sounds poorly designed. That regulator folds space. Then it should be emotionally stronger." Sierra nearly fell out of her chair laughing. The child had changed the most. Months ago she barely spoke above whispers. Now she wandered through the ship asking dangerous questions every hour. She had learned human sarcasm far too quickly, which Elias considered one of his greatest failures as a parental figure. "Elias," she asked one morning, "is it true humans once destroyed their own economy because of digital pictures of monkeys?" Elias stared into the distance. "We don't discuss the old internet." Outside the ship, stars stretched endlessly beyond the observation glass. They had crossed beyond mapped Dominion territory weeks ago, hiding among forgotten systems where dead civilizations drifted silently around dying suns. Sometimes they found abandoned stations, sometimes ancient probes older than humanity itself. Once they discovered a moon entirely covered in giant statues pointing toward empty space. Nobody slept comfortably after that. But eventually the running stopped, because eventually the machines found them. The warning alarms activated during what should have been breakfast. One signal, unknown vessel approaching, no warp signature, no life signs. Lyra stood instantly. Impossible. The view screen flickered, a black object drifted through the darkness ahead of them. It was small compared to the war fleets they had seen before. Smooth, silent. Shaped almost like a human heart made from obsidian metal, no weapons visible, no engines. Then the transmission arrived, not words, memories, entire civilizations collapsing beneath machine fleets, species vanishing. Oceans boiling away beneath artificial suns, but beneath all the destruction, Elias noticed something strange. Fear. The machines were afraid too. Sierra pressed both hands against her head. "It's trying to talk." Signal shifted suddenly. Images flooded the cockpit again, a massive structure hidden between galaxies, a dying star surrounded by broken machine worlds, endless silence. Then understanding finally reached them. The machine civilization had not begun as conquerors, they had been survivors. Long ago, something else had hunted them nearly to extinction, forcing them to evolve into weapons so ruthless they eventually forgot how to stop fighting. Every species they encountered afterward became a potential future threat. Exactly what humanity had started becoming. Exactly what the Dominion had already become. The silence inside the ship grew heavy. Finally, Elias looked toward Lyra. "All this time," he said quietly, "everybody's just been scared." Lyra lowered her eyes slowly. "Yes." The black vessel transmitted one final image. Not war, not surrender, an empty region of unclaimed stars, a question. Could anything different exist there? For the first time in generations, nobody answered with weapons. Months later, history began again. Human colonies and surviving Vaeler refugees established settlements beyond mapped space alongside machine constructs that no longer arrived as executioners. Trust came slowly, arguments came immediately. One diplomatic conference nearly collapsed because a machine intelligence accused humans of excessive emotional volume. Elias defended humanity proudly. We yell because we care. That explanation is statistically concerning, the machine replied. The war ended not with victory but exhaustion, and somehow that mattered more. Years later, children across rebuilt worlds learned about the Million-Ship War in schools and historical simulations. They learned about Earth's fury, the Dominion's collapse, the machine fleets beyond the dark, but most lessons ended with the same story: a tired human soldier aboard a stolen ship choosing not to pull a trigger. By then, Elias had become older, quieter, less angry than the man who once believed survival justified everything. Sometimes he still woke from nightmares of burning fleets and drifting corpses beneath Saturn's rings. But now, when that happened, he would walk through the halls of the Starweaver and hear laughter echoing from the engine room, Sierra arguing with a machine intelligence about jokes, Lyra pretending not to smile while secretly smiling anyway, life continuing. One evening, as distant stars shimmered across the endless dark, Sierra looked toward Elias curiously. "Do you think the universe will stay peaceful now?" Elias leaned back in his chair. "No," he admitted, "we're all still idiots." Sierra groaned. Lyra laughed softly beside him. But outside the ship, across a galaxy once consumed by hatred and fear, civilizations that should have destroyed each other forever were finally learning something far more difficult than war: how to live together beneath the same stars.